Friends, gather close. Today I want to talk about something that stirs the soul, something that resonates in the quiet spaces of our hearts. The power of silence. Not the silence of avoidance or fear, but the bold, intentional silence that speaks louder than words ever could. The kind of silence that dismantles egos, not with force, but with presence. The kind of silence that says, I see you, I hear you, but I choose my peace. This is a journey into the strength of stillness, a call to embrace the courage it takes to hold your ground without saying a word. Let's walk this path together in the spirit of vulnerability and truth and uncover why your silence can be the most powerful response of all. We live in a world that worships noise. Everywhere we turn, there's a clamor for attention. Social media shouting matches, endless debates, voices vying to be the loudest in the room. It's easy to believe that to be heard, we must add to the cacophony. But what if the opposite is true? What if the most profound way to assert your worth is to step back, to pause, to let the noise crash against the shore of your silence? And this isn't about being passive. It's about reclaiming your power by refusing to engage in battles that don't deserve your energy. Silence, my friends, is not weakness. It's a choice. It's the deliberate act of saying, I will not let your chaos pull me in. When someone's ego demands your reaction, when they bait you with words meant to wound or provoke, your silence is a mirror. It reflects their need for control, their hunger for validation back onto them. And in that reflection, something shifts. Their ego, built on the expectation of your response, begins to tremble because without your participation, their narrative has no fuel. Let's get vulnerable here. I've been in those moments. Haven't we all? Where someone's words felt like a hook tugging at my heart, begging me to jump into the fray. Maybe it was a colleague's subtle jab, a family member's criticism, or a stranger's judgment flung carelessly. My instinct was to fire back, to defend, to prove my worth. But every time I chose silence instead, something magical happened. The air changed, the power dynamic shifted. My silence didn't just protect my peace, it exposed the fragility of their need to dominate. This is what Brené Brown teaches us. Courage isn't always loud. It's not always about standing on a soapbox or winning an argument. Sometimes courage is the quiet resolve to hold your space, to let your presence speak for itself. It's the bravery to trust that you don't need to prove anything to anyone. Your silence becomes a declaration. I am enough, and I don't need your approval to know it. Now, let's be clear. Silence isn't about suppression. It's not about swallowing your truth or pretending you're unaffected. It's about discernment. It's about knowing when to speak and when to let your stillness do the talking. There's a difference between silence that comes from fear and silence that comes from strength. The silence I'm talking about is rooted in self-awareness, in the deep knowing that you don't need to engage with every challenge thrown your way. Think about the last time someone tried to pull you into their drama. Maybe they were fishing for a reaction, hoping to feed their ego with your frustration. What would have happened if you'd met their energy with silence? Not a cold, dismissive silence, but a warm, grounded one. A silence that says, I see you, but I'm choosing me. That kind of silence is disarming. It's unexpected. It leaves the other person with nowhere to go but inward. Egos thrive on attention. They feed on conflict, on the back and forth of who's right and who's wrong. When you refuse to play that game, you starve the ego of its lifeblood. Your silence becomes a boundary, a line in the sand that says, this is where your influence ends and my peace begins. And in that moment, you're not just protecting yourself, you're modeling what it looks like to live with integrity. Let's pause for a moment and feel the weight of this. Silence isn't just a tactic. It's a spiritual practice. It's an active trust in yourself, in your worth, in your ability to stand tall without needing to shout. It's a reminder that you don't have to fill every void with words. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is let the void be. I want to share a story. A few years ago, I was in a meeting where someone was determined to undermine me. Their words were sharp, their tone dripping with condescension. My heart raced, my mind screamed to clap back, but instead I took a breath. I leaned back in my chair. I let silence fill the space, and in that silence, the room shifted. Their words hung in the air, unacknowledged, and suddenly, they were the ones who looked small. My silence didn't just protect me, it revealed the truth of the moment. This is the alchemy of silence. It transforms. It takes a situation charged with tension and turns it into something else entirely. It's not about winning or losing. It's about transcending the game altogether. When you choose silence, you're saying, I'm not here to compete for your approval. I'm here to live my truth. But let's be real, silence isn't always easy. It takes courage to sit in discomfort, to resist the urge to defend or explain. It takes trust in yourself to know that your worth doesn't depend on someone else's opinion. And it takes practice to discern when silence is the right response and when your voice needs to be heard. So, how do we cultivate this kind of silence? It starts with grounding ourselves in our own worth. It's about doing the inner work to know who we are so we don't need external validation to feel whole. It's about building the muscle of self-regulation so we can pause in the heat of the moment and choose our response with intention. Meditation helps, journaling helps, therapy helps, surrounding yourself with people who lift you up helps. All of these practices build the foundation for a silence that's not reactive, but rooted. A silence that's not about hiding, but about standing in your truth. And here's the beautiful paradox. When you master this kind of silence, your voice becomes even more powerful because when you do choose to speak, it's with clarity, with purpose, with the weight of someone who knows their worth. Your words carry the authority of someone who doesn't need to shout to be heard. Let's talk about the ripple effect. When you choose silence over reaction, you're not just protecting your own peace. You're inviting others to do the same. You're showing the people around you what it looks like to live with dignity, to refuse to be pulled into unnecessary conflict. You're modeling a way of being that's grounded in love, not fear. I've seen this in action. I've watched friends, colleagues, even strangers shift their energy when met with silence. I've seen egos deflate, not because they were attacked, but because they were given no fuel to keep burning. I've seen relationships transform when one person dared to choose peace over pride. This is the gift of silence. It creates space. Space for reflection, for growth, for truth to rise to the surface. When you step back from the noise, you make room for something deeper to emerge. You allow the other person to sit with their own words, their own actions, their own ego. And here's the thing about egos. They're fragile. They depend on external validation to survive. When you withdraw your participation, you expose that fragility. You don't need to argue or fight or prove a point. Your silence does the work for you. But let's hold space for the complexity here. Silence isn't always the answer. There are times when speaking up is essential, when your voice is needed to advocate for yourself or others, to set boundaries, to call out injustice. The key is discernment. It's about knowing when to lean into silence and when to let your words fly. So, how do you know? Listen to your body. Your gut will tell you. If you feel contracted, defensive, or desperate to prove something, silence might be the wiser choice. If you feel expansive, grounded, and clear, it might be time to speak. Trust yourself. You have the wisdom within you. Let's talk about the cultural piece. In some spaces, silence is misunderstood. It's seen as weakness, as acquiescence. But that's a story we can rewrite. We can reclaim silence as a tool of empowerment, as a way to honor our own boundaries and invite others to do the same. Think about the women in my life, the ones who've taught me the power of a well-timed pause. My grandmother, who could silence a room with a single look. My mentor, who knew exactly when to let her silence speak louder than her words. These women didn't need to shout to be heard. Their silence was their strength. And this isn't just for women, it's for all of us. Men, women, non-binary folks, anyone who's ever felt the pressure to prove themselves in a world that rewards noise. Your silence is your rebellion. It's your refusal to play by rules that don't serve you. Let's get practical for a moment. What does this look like in real life? It's the pause you take before responding to a passive-aggressive email. It's the breath you take when someone cuts you off in a meeting. It's the choice to walk away from a conversation that's going nowhere. It's the decision to let someone's criticism sit unanswered, knowing it says more about them than it does about you. Here's a challenge. The next time you feel triggered, try silence. Just for a moment, take a breath, feel your feet on the ground. Ask yourself, do I need to engage here, or can I trust my silence to do the work? You might be surprised at what happens. I want to talk about the shadow side, because vulnerability means owning the whole story. Silence can be misused. It can become a weapon, a way to shut others out or avoid accountability. That's not what we're talking about here. The silence I'm advocating for is active, intentional, and rooted in love for yourself and others. Also worth noting that silence doesn't always feel good. Sometimes it feels like swallowing fire. Sometimes it feels like you're betraying yourself by not speaking up. That's okay. Sit with the discomfort. Trust that it's teaching you something. Trust that your silence is still speaking. Let's talk about the science for a moment. Neuroscience tells us that when we're triggered, our amygdala, the fear center of our brain, lights up. It screams, fight, defend, react. But when we pause, when we breathe, we give our prefrontal cortex, the part of our brain responsible for reason and self-control, a chance to catch up. Silence is literally a way to rewire your brain for calm. This is why mindfulness matters. It's why practices like meditation and breath work are so powerful. They train us to pause, to create space between stimulus and response. They teach us that we don't have to be at the mercy of our triggers. We can choose. And in that choice, we find freedom. Freedom from the need to prove ourselves. Freedom from the cycle of reaction and regret. Freedom to live in alignment with who we are and what we value. Let's talk about the spiritual dimension. For those of you who lean into faith, silence is sacred. It's the space where you hear the still, small voice. It's the place where you connect with something bigger than yourself, whether you call it God, the universe, or your own inner wisdom. Silence is where you find it. Think about the mystics, the poets, the prophets. They all knew the power of silence. They knew that in the quiet, we touch the divine. They knew that sometimes the most profound truths are spoken without words. This is what I want for you. I want you to know the power of your own silence. I want you to trust that you don't need to fill every space with words. I want you to feel the strength that comes from standing in your truth, even when the world demands a reaction. So let's practice. Right now, in this moment, take a breath. Feel your body. Notice the thoughts racing through your mind. And just for a second, let them be. Let the noise settle. Let the silence rise. What do you hear? Maybe it's the sound of your own heartbeat. Maybe it's the whisper of your own worth. Maybe it's the reminder that you are enough just as you are. This is the gift of silence. It's not just about breaking someone else's ego. It's about breaking the chains that keep you tethered to their expectations. It's about stepping into your own power, your own truth, your own peace. And here's the beautiful irony. When you embrace silence, you create space for connection. Because when you're not caught up in reacting, you're free to listen. You're free to see the other person not as an adversary, but as a human being with their own struggles and fears. This is how we heal. This is how we build bridges, not by shouting louder, but by listening deeper, not by fighting harder, but by loving braver. So my friends, the next time you're faced with an ego that demands your reaction, remember this. Your silence is your strength. It's your shield. It's your sword. It's the quiet rebellion that says, I am whole and I don't need your validation to know it. Let's commit to this together. Let's choose silence when it serves us. Let's trust our worth. Let's break the cycle of noise and ego and create a world where presence speaks louder than words. Thank you for being here. Thank you for daring to listen, to feel, to sit in the quiet with me. Your silence, your presence is already changing the world.